Hi and welcome to this video. Today we're going to look at the United States presidency, electing a president, and some of the issues that we're going to discuss are the Constitutional Convention, electors, the First Electoral College, the presidential election of 1800, the 12th Amendment, nomination of electors, the electoral voting process, the contested election of 1876, candidates elected unanimously, the Solid South, contested votes in 2000, Election Day, and contingent elections in Congress. All right, so let's get started. So one of the issues raised at the Constitutional Convention regarding the president was the possibility of excess or abuse of power. Remember that the colonists had just fought a revolutionary war to overthrow the arbitrary power of a very strong centralized government, namely a king. They were also concerned about the use of the military. Again, they didn't want to create a dictatorial president, Congress's power over the president, fear of bribery of the president, and concerned over unlimited terms of office or in monarchy. For example, Democrats accused Theodore Roosevelt of being a militarist, as you can see in this political editorial. Edmund Randolph, who was a delegate from Virginia, was reported to have strenuously opposed a single executive, that means one president. He regarded the presidency as the fetus of monarchy. Gouverneur Morris, a delegate from Pennsylvania, argued that it is the most difficult of all, rightly to balance the executive. Make him too weak, the legislature will usurp his power. Make him too strong, he will usurp on the legislature, which is, of course, a problem that was fixed by checks and balances of power. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution designates electors. That is, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. That is to say that if, for example, in the state of Nevada, we have 2 U.S. senators and 3 congresspeople, that equals a total of 5 electors for the state of Nevada. But no senator or representative or person holding an office or trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. So let's talk about the First Electoral College. So under the original plan outlined by the Constitution, each state's electors would cast votes for 2 candidates. The candidate with the most votes would become the president, while the runner-up would become the vice president. The House of Representatives was required to break ties. The term Electoral College was not used until 1845, when it was written into Title III of the United States Code concerning the role of the nation's president. The United States Code is a document that compiles, simplifies, and updates the body of federal law. So Title III, the President, Chapter 1, Section 4, each state may, by law, provide for the filing of any vacancies which may occur in its college of electors when such college meets to give its electoral vote. So that's where it gets its original name. The Electoral College system was forced to change with the emergence of political parties. Remember, the Founding Fathers did not envision that the government would descend into partisan politics, but it did. The first electoral problem was in 1796 with the election of the Federalist, John Adams as president of the Democratic Republicans, and Thomas Jefferson as his vice president, who actually was a political enemy. The presidential election of 1800. The next problem occurred in 1800 when the 2 candidates for the Democratic Republican Party, Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, tied for first place. The Federalists in Congress wanted to undermine their opposition, who supported Jefferson. The House voted 35 times without obtaining a majority for either candidate. The deadlock was broken when Alexander Hamilton, who was a leading Federalist, chose Jefferson over Burr. All right, to remedy the problem that I just described, let's talk about the 12th Amendment. The 12th Amendment specifies that electors will cast 1 vote for president and 1 vote for the vice president, and that was ratified in 1804. The size of the Electoral College is equal to the total membership of both houses of Congress, 435 representatives in the House of Representatives and 100 senators, plus the 3 electors allocated to Washington, D.C., so there are currently 538 total electors. All right, let's talk about the nomination of electors. The Constitution allows each state to determine its own method of nominating electors. They are often nominated by the state's political parties. They may be nominated during primary elections, party conventions, or in the case of Pennsylvania, by the campaign committees. The popular vote in each state determines how that state's electors will vote. So this is a very important point, right? A lot of us believe erroneously that when we go to place a vote during election day that we're placing the vote for the president. In fact, we are not. What we're doing is we're placing a vote for an elector who will then place their vote for the president of the United States in the Electoral College. So this is the process of electoral voting. After Election Day, electors meet in their respective state capitals on the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December. The meeting is opened by an election certification official who makes sure that all electors are present and that any vacancies are filled. The electors then cast their votes on separate ballots for president and vice president. Each elector signs 5 copies of the certificate of vote, which states the ballot results. 1 copy sent to the President of the Senate, the U.S. Vice President, by certified mail. The Senate President presents the certificates from all of the states to a joint session of Congress for approval. Let's talk about something called the faithless electors. A faithless elector is one who casts an electoral vote for someone other than the candidate whom they have been pledged to elect, or who refuses to vote for any candidate. The Supreme Court ruled that states may make laws requiring electors to vote for their state's winning candidate. There are laws to punish faithless electors in 24 states. Okay, let's talk about the disqualification of electors. Under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution, no person holding a federal office, either elected or appointed, may become an elector. Under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, any person who has held a state or federal office and then later rebelled against the government may not be an elector. However, Congress may approve an elector by a 2/3 vote in both houses. Next, we'll talk about the contested election of 1876. During the presidential election of 1876, 21 electoral votes were called into question. Democratic candidate Samuel Tilden won the popular vote for president by a 250,000 vote margin. However, 4 states, including Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Oregon, posted 2 conflicting sets of certified election results. Tilden needed 1 vote to win, while Republican candidate Rutherford B. Hayes needed all 20. A 15-member commission of 8 Republican and 7 Democrats was formed to decide the fate of the electoral votes. By 8-7, they gave the votes to Hayes. And this was part of something, part of a bargain that ended Reconstruction. The deal was that if those votes went towards Rutherford B. Hayes, that Rutherford B. Hayes, upon becoming president, would end Reconstruction in the South. This is 1876, so right after the American Civil War. Let's talk about presidents that have been elected unanimously. George Washington is the only president to have received 100% of the electoral vote. In 1804, the incumbent Thomas Jefferson received 92% of the electoral vote. That's Jefferson's second term, easily defeating his Federalist rival. James Monroe swept the electoral process in 1820 due to positive public opinion. And Abraham Lincoln garnered 91% of the electoral vote in 1864 with the abstention of the Confederate States. That means that the South, by this point, had refused to participate in the election. And so he had no Southern Democratic opposition. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal captured almost all of the electoral votes except for Maine and Vermont. Look at Lyndon Johnson, campaigned as the candidate who would keep America out of nuclear war. This is in 1964, losing only a few of the southern states. Look, even Texas went Democrat at that election. The incumbent Richard Nixon succeeded in marginalizing his opponent George McGovern, losing only one state of Massachusetts. Massachusetts, of course, is the home of the Kennedy dynasty. Ronald Reagan, also a blowout. Reagan campaigned against Jimmy Carter's ineffective policies and the ongoing Iran hostage crisis. And he was able to sweep into office in 1980 and do even better in 1984 in his midterm election. This is known sometimes as the Reagan Revolution. Let's talk about the Solid South. This refers to the strength of the Democrat Party from 1877 to the end of Reconstruction, about 1876, or 1876 to about 1964. Southerners supported the Democrats who had supported racial segregation. Republican Richard Nixon reversed the trend in 1968 by appealing to Southern conservatives. This graphic really illustrates the way in which the Democrat Party was solidly entrenched in the South. This is the 1924 presidential election between the Republican Calvin Coolidge and the Democrat John Davis. And you can see Calvin Coolidge clearly took everything except for the South. So this is a map of Southern conservative Republicans after Nixon and what is known as Nixon's Southern strategy. And we can see here that this is essentially when the political map begins to flip. That is to say that the Republican Party is now going to gain a foothold into the South, or to appeal to Southern conservatives. All right, next let's talk about the contested election of 2000. And this, of course, was between George W. Bush and the Republican candidate in Al Gore. And you can see from the electoral counts that essentially you're looking at 50.5% for the Republican Bush, 49.5% for the Democrat. This was a highly contested election that based upon the votes, electoral votes in Florida. Florida is a very large electoral state with 25 total electors, and a controversy over what was known as hanging chads on the electoral ballots and required recounts, and it ultimately went to the Supreme Court. As I mentioned, in 2000, Bush received a little more than 500 more votes in Florida than Democrat candidate Al Gore. Under Florida law, though, a recount was mandatory because it was so close. However, the method of recount was declared unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court also voted 5-4 to end the Florida recount and certify the vote. The vote was certified by Katherine Harris, the Republican Secretary of State and co-chair of the Bush election campaign. Florida's governor at the time was Bush's younger brother, Jeb, which led to allegations of a conspiracy, which I should point out have never been substantiated. So in American presidential politics, we have something known as a winner-take-all, and this is going to influence our electoral college. So in the 2000 election, George W. Bush won by less than 5% of the popular vote in the following states, and you can see those here. Ralph Nader of the Green Party candidate attracted 2.7% of the popular vote nationwide. Many people think that had Nader not run, these voters would have voted for Gore and changed the result of the election. All right, let's talk briefly about Election Day. Federal law sets that the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November as the day for holding federal elections. Though the manner for choosing electors is determined by state legislatures, all states choose electors by popular election. The popular vote for president is actually a vote for the candidate's electors, as I've already stated. All states but two use the winner-take-all method, giving all electors to the candidate receiving a majority of the popular vote. Maine and Nebraska select one elector by the popular vote within each congressional district. The remaining two electors are selected by statewide popular vote. Okay, let's talk about the joint sessions of Congress. The 12th Amendment specifies that Congress meet in joint session, that is, the House and the Senate together, to certify the vote. Federal law mandates that Congress count the votes and declare a winner on the 6th day of January. Either the President of the Senate or the President pro tempore presides over the session and declares who has been elected President and Vice President. If no one receives 270 electoral votes, the 12th Amendment requires a contingent presidential election in the House of Representatives. The House must choose from among the 3 candidates who receive the most electoral votes. Each state delegation has a single vote. To be elected, the winner must receive 26 votes. 2/3 of the states must be represented. Balloting continues until there is a winner. The House has chosen 2 presidents using this process, including Thomas Jefferson in 1801 and John Quincy Adams in 1825. All right, let's talk about the contingent vice presidential election. The 12th Amendment requires the Senate to choose the vice president when no candidate receives a sufficient electoral vote. The Senate must choose between the top 2 candidates. 2/3 of the Senate must be in session. The candidate wins by a simple majority. In 1837, Virginia's electors refused to vote for Democratic presidential candidate Martin Van Buren, his running mate Richard Mentor Johnson. The Senate had to choose between Johnson and his opponent, Francis Granger of the Whig Party. The Senate voted for Johnson. In the event of a deadlocked Congress, this is what happened. If the House of Representatives has not chosen a president elect in time for inauguration at noon on January 20th, then the vice president-elect becomes acting president until the House should select a president. If the vice president is also not known, then under the Presidential Succession Act of 1947, the sitting Speaker of the House becomes the acting president until either the House should select a president or the Senate should select a vice president. And of course, in American presidential politics, we have the peaceful transfer of power from political opponents sometimes, which fortunately for us have never resulted in fighting, that we've always had a peaceful transfer of power. Okay, that's it for this video, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it.